Hello everybody, welcome to Red Tool House. Today we're going to do another video on our trailer rebuild series we've been doing. We've been working on this 13-foot utility trailer. I'll link to a playlist here so you can see what we're talking about. This is the trailer we're working on. This is the trailer that went over the hill. We're going to work on that one later. It just suffered a dented fender. It's okay. You can see the video here if you like. But we got our new coupler on. Obviously we covered that in a video previous. Eric came over, helped us do that because he's one heck of a welder, and I trust him way more than I trust my welds. But now we're going to do some additional mods that require some attachments that I think I'm going to try to take those on myself. Again, I'm no accomplished welder. I am a noob at welding, but we'll see how it goes. So our first mod that we want to do, and thanks to the guys at E-Trailer for providing this, we're going to add this receiver tube. Now you may be wondering, Troy, where exactly are you going to stick that? Well, never mind. So as we've talked in the past, the purpose of this trailer rebuild is to really make this a utility trailer. It needs to service a lot of different things that we do. It needs to have a lot of utilitarian function. Well, one thing that we like to do is we like to go up to our camp. We've talked about that in other videos. It's about a 4-hour drive away, 3.5 hour, 4-hour drive away, up in the mountains of West Virginia. We take our kayaks, we take our mountain bikes, we do that kind of stuff. Well, usually I take my big 16-foot trailer, which is kind of a beast to take up there, and I'd like to be able to take this one to be able to take my kayaks and take my bikes and take some of the other things. Well, the thing I got to think of is like, wow, I've got this really nice Swagman bicycle rack that when we'd take our bikes down to Florida and do things on other vacations, and we'd take Kelly's at the time. Kelly had a Pathfinder. And we'd take it, and that worked out well because it was a type that goes into the receiver tube. It was a hold 4 bikes, and worked really well. So I thought, wow, wouldn't it be cool, since we really don't use that much anymore, what if we adapted the trailer to accept that? So the thought was to put this receiver tube on the back to be able to accept that Swagman, but then also I can put a regular receiver on here with a 2-inch ball, and if I'm using this around the farm, then I can transport maybe a smaller trailer, or if I'm using Dad's log splitter, I could have the log splitter behind, and with a tractor, I could take the trailer that I'm going to haul firewood on and the log splitter up at one time. So it'd have some function there, just to be able to move things around. So talked to my buddies at E-Trailer. They said, sounds like a great idea. Here's what you need. So for maximum support, I obviously want to have this receiver tube not only connected to the very end of the trailer, but to the closest cross member. So we really want to bridge this gap between these two pieces of angle. And if you look, that to be up against the face of that angle, so I can have multiple contact points in our weld, I really need this receiver tube to be about 26 inches long and still stick out enough behind the trailer that it's accessible but not too far out to where obviously it becomes a shin buster, because you know how that works. And I don't necessarily want it to drag every time I come up out of the creek crossing or anything if it sticks out too far. So the lengths that these come in, they're set lengths. This one is a 36-inch length, I believe. So obviously want to cut it short. So if I want 26, then I need to obviously cut 10 inches off. So the plan would be for this to stick out a certain spot here. So the first, whew, those things are heavy. So the first challenge, of course, is to get this to the right length. So with the tools that I have, we're going to see if I can cut this off. If not, then we'll have to take it somewhere. So watch in amazement or horror, whichever you prefer. Okay, so many of you know that have watched the channel for a while that woodworking has been something I've been into for, it's going on 20 years now. Really been into it. There's times that I've ebbed and flowed, but it's how I set up my shop. My shop is a woodworking shop. Well, okay, maybe it's a trash shop right now, but and I have to say, those of you that have commented, I've cleaned up half of my workshop. I spent an entire weekend and got this half clean. So you can see my worktop. You can actually see it. It's not covered in stuff. And those of you guys that like to make fun of my saggy shelves, I even flipped them over. So they, instead of having a big smiley face, they're all very discontent and frowning. But so anyway, got my shop cleaned up. And the shop is, like I said, set up for woodworking. So to get into any type of metalworking, welding, cutting, any of that type of stuff is totally new for me. So this really isn't, a how-to. It's more of a, hey, watch and see if Troy burns the place down. So I reached out to, actually, Northern reached out to me. Northern Tool reached out to me and said, hey, Troy, we see you working on projects. How can we help? And I said, well, as a matter of fact, I'm trying to learn to do welding. What can you send me? So they said, hey, why don't you try out one of our Klutch brand welders? I'm not familiar with that brand. It is Northern's own brand, so it's not a brand that I recognize. But after looking, it's like, hey, there's a lot of people that are using these. There's pretty good reviews on them. Sure, send it to me. I'll give it a shot. So the Klutch welder they sent me is the MP140SI, which is a MIG TIG stick machine, which I had to figure out what the heck those were. I knew stick welding. Dad had taught me stick welding a while back. So I knew what that was, knew what that entailed. MIG welding, wire feed, I'd played around with some of those. I had a Harbor Freight one that lasted, I think it did 2 welds and then went, so obviously punted on that. But I've never done any TIG, not that familiar with it. But I thought, well, let's give this a try. This is an inverter welder. It's 110, so it just plugs into a standard outlet. And I wanted to try stick. Dad had given me a boatload of sticks. I don't know if you can see up there, there's a whole bunch of 6011, 6013s, I believe. So my first welding endeavor was something that needed to be fixed. This is the grate, part of the grate in our fireplace. There's 2 of these. And of course, they stand in the firebox, another one here, and your logs rest on those. Well, the weld had failed here, and it fell apart. And I'm really hesitant to show a close-up of this. Let's do it anyway. So this is a detail that you would maybe see at maybe Helen Keller's School of Fine Welding. That's probably offensive. I probably shouldn't say that. Let me retract that. This is obviously noob welding. It's horrible. It is ugly, but it holds together. I've tossed this thing across the room multiple times and it hasn't broken. So that's what we're going to go with for now. That's project 1 out of the way, right? Crossing things off the list. But I've also done a bit of bead tests. Again, if you follow the channel, you know that the one thing we have a boatload of around here is old gas pipe. So what's more exciting than taking gas pipe and welding it and seeing if you blow yourself up? No, we had some cutoffs, did some bead testing, even had the boys come down and then we played around with it a little bit. So I feel that I can use this welder without killing myself or injuring others or without setting things on fire. Setting important things on fire. I set some things on fire. So we're going to give this a try with our welding the receiver tube onto the trailer. But first, like I said, I need to cut that. So there's obviously manufacturers, ooh, that's a nice piece of red oak, that have metal cutoff tools that are kind of like a chop saw like this, but for metal. I've seen them. I know they exist. Obviously, you guys know them too. I don't have one. I do have a lot of miter saws. Northern also sent me a new compound sliding miter saw that I'm going to replace this guy with. And we'll detail that in another video. But so the plan is to take this wood blade off and see if we can put a cutting blade on it and see what we can get out of that. Now, obviously, the first thing that you guys are probably recognizing, and I recognize obviously as well, is we're not going to put the blade on here and start cutting this spot because there is a lot of sawdust around. My dust collection doesn't work very well for this thing, so there's a lot of sawdust. We're definitely not going to have hot metal sparks flying into all this sawdust laying around. We're going to take this and move it out in a safe spot. Goodness. Now, the reason why I'm choosing this Delta saw to do that, that thing weighs a metric ton. It is unbelievable how heavy that is. That's back when Delta made really good tools. So we've got a 10-inch miter saw here. So I went to the local box store and bought the Diablo metal cutoff 10-inch wheel. And the thing you got to watch is the RPMs on this. This is rated at 6,100, and most of these chop saws run a little faster. All right, I think that's going to work. No wobbles. We're going to move it over here so we can brace up and support and do all that fun stuff. Oh, parfait. White oak to the rescue. Okay. Hold that in place. Now again, if I was using a metal cutoff saw, it's my understanding those have, they don't have the resistance. They don't have the spring back like this does. You know, this thing wants to come back up. Whereas a metal cutoff saw, you can just kind of let gravity pull it down and still have to probably put some downward pressure on it. Yeah, so metalwork PPE is definitely something we're going to have to invest in. I hate wearing glasses and having to put goggles on, but I also hate having an eye full of metal too. All right, that went surprisingly well. The way my week's been going, figured I'd kill something. Pretty clean cut. As you can see there from the remaining piece, here's what we wanted. And nice and clean. A little warm, so we're not going to touch it with our hand. Well, I'm going to call that test successful. The nothing's on fire yet, so that's why I was shooting my sparks out into the rain there. That even in a workshop, there's always chances of stuff smoldering, so hopefully that won't be the case. All right, now it's time to do some welding. Alrighty, well, we got the trailer backed in here out of the rain. Got it wiped down a little bit. We got a, there's a bolt in the way there, or a nut that's welded on. That was kind of the cable chase for the wiring harness. So we're going to take that off because that's right where we want to put that weld point for the back of the receiver tube. So we're going to need to take that out and grind that smooth, and of course get this cleaned up. We want to get that metal as clean as possible, is my understanding. So we're going to take a cutoff wheel, cut that off, and then we're going to grind it down a little bit, and then we'll wire brush our contact points. Alright, so I got my surfaces all prepped. The underside of this is nice and clean. Both sides of that are clean. Our receiver tube, obviously surface is clean here on the top of the back, sides, bottom, and then the other side, and even a little bit of a bevel. As I understand, with the bevel here, as we go in against that bevel will help be a little channel for weld to fill, and hopefully, if I can weld worth a darn, will be put into place. So that's where it's going to go. So now comes the almost impossible part of clamping this with one person. Everybody's up at the house. I can't yell out enough, and I'm too lazy to drive up there to get them. So let's go. Try to clamp it somewhere where I won't be welding the clamp to the trailer. I wish you were born with 3 hands. It may just stick out a little bit in high school, but man, it'd have been worth it. Alright, while I get this set up, thinking of bright lights make me remind me that I need to remind you about our survey. If you haven't taken our survey yet, it's just a way for you all to share with us how we can improve the channel, make it better for your viewing pleasure. And everyone that takes the survey and wants to include their email at the end, then we'll put you in a drawing to win one of our Olights that we've been bragging about for a while. So it's time for me to put up or shut up, right? So be sure to check that out. I'll put a link below there in the video description. All right, let's do some tacks. Turn our voltage, our amperage all the way up since we're welding some thick plate. Now, it's my understanding the 6011 is kind of the farmer's rod because it can handle it. It's a deep penetration type rod. It can handle a lot of garbage, a lot of dirt and rust and oil and that type of stuff. That's what I've heard. Like I said, no expert here. We'll do a couple tacks to hold things in place and then see where we can go from there. Alright, so got a couple tacks in place there. Get the focus. One right here. Again, I am no professional welder, that's faux show. Daggone you guys that know how to weld, make it look easy. That looks terrible. I'm embarrassed to show the underside. I really can't because of the stupid camera, but if I'm going to continue to weld, I'm going to have to get a really good grinder. Ugly. Alright, well, beauty of it is it'll be covered up by wood at some point. So we'll see how that goes. All right, time for a little rattle can love here to keep the rust down till we can get our final finish on. Get some runs in the paint to match the runs in my weld. I think I just killed my rattle can too. Sure enough, DOA. Well, that is a pretty good sign. That means it's time to quit when the can goes dead. Don't forget the survey below. Again, chance to win a flashlight. We'll do a drawing probably mid-December so people can get it in time for Christmas. All right, take care.